of the Oklahoman, and I want to thank you for being here today. Let me start by saying thanks to all of you in this audience. You're the ones that get it. You're engaged, and you are understanding of the importance of educating and informing yourself on the issues and on the candidates. So thank you for being here and being part of the process. I want to thank all of our candidates for being here this evening. You all care a great deal about this state, or you wouldn't be doing what you're doing. We know you have busy schedules, so making some time to be with us this evening is really important, so thank you. I also want to thank the people that are watching at home. We're streaming this live on newsok.com, the state's largest news website. We expect that the audience will grow exponentially from there. At the Oklahoman, we have a goal. Our goal is to help the state be a better place to live, work, and raise a family, to help the state be a better place to live, work, and raise a family. I'm not sure that we always do that successfully, but that's what we strive to do. One of the ways that we strive to do that is through our journalism, what we call our First Amendment obligations. We take it very, very seriously. To be a voice for the voiceless, to call for change when change is needed, to, yes, shine a light on government, and sometimes expose corruption and injustice. It's what we all need out of our news outlets, and we hope to accomplish that. To that end, we have started a series here recently called The State of the State. Maybe some of you have seen it, where we're talking about those issues where we rank really poorly across the country. Incarceration rates, education, healthcare, and more importantly, health outcomes, mental health and substance abuse. We can, we must, and we should do much better. So our goal is to talk about states that are doing things maybe correctly that we can learn from, begin and facilitate a community conversation where we bring elected officials and community stakeholders together to talk about these issues. We hope that you'll support that effort, be a part of that process, and follow that both in the newspaper and on our websites. With that, I want to turn things over to our staff, our team, to get things started, and that's Adam Wilmoth, Carla Hinton, and Ben Felder. We also have Justin Wingader, who's live tweeting, and will take some, I believe, some questions perhaps from the audience. One request. This isn't a political rally, it's a forum. So we want it to be a civil discourse this evening. We know you all are here because you care about the issues, and you care about this state. So thank you for being a part of it. And Ben, let's get started.
Thank you. Well, good evening. I'm Ben Felder with the Oklahoman, and welcome to tonight's forum. Following the 2010 elections, Republicans achieved a trifecta of power in state government, controlling the State House, Senate, and the governor's office. Governor Mary Fallin won that seat in 2010 and is completing her second and final term this year. Joining us tonight are 6 candidates running for the Republican nomination for governor of Oklahoma, each hoping to defend the seat for the party in the general election on November 6th. But first, Oklahoma will hold its primary election on June 26th. A runoff between the 2 top vote recipients will take place if no candidate finishes above 50%, and that runoff is slated for August 28th. With the primary election nearly 2 months away, tonight we hope to dive into some of the most important issues facing Oklahoma and awaiting its next governor. Joining me tonight are my colleagues from the Oklahoman, Carla Hinton, the Oklahoman's religion editor, Adam Wilmoth, energy editor for the Oklahoman, and over to my left here is Justin Wingader, our federal government reporter. As Chris said, we'll be live tweeting and possibly taking some questions from those out on social media. Some of these topics tonight come directly from readers of the Oklahoman. They also come from the Oklahoman's ongoing State of the State series, which is exploring some of the ways our state and communities are falling behind and what can be done in response. Tonight, the rules are pretty simple. We ask that you keep your answers within the time allowed for each question, which is 90 seconds. Meg Wingader is seated here in the front, and she will be raising a card to signify 30 seconds and when your time is up, and that's something that I'll be closely monitoring tonight. We're also asking the audience to hold its applause, except for at the end of tonight's forum, and right now, as we officially welcome our 6 candidates to tonight's forum. Before we dive into the questions, we are going to open it up for opening remarks for each of the candidates. They are, I believe, sitting in alphabetical order, and that will dictate where we start throughout the evening, which will start on the far left here with Mick Cornett. 90 seconds each for opening remarks.
Thank you, Ben, and thank you to the audience. Appreciate the Oklahoman putting this together, and this crowd is amazing. Apparently, everyone's here except the fire marshal. I'm astonished, and we love the enthusiasm. As you can imagine, each of us have been traveling around the state, talking to people. There's a lot of emotion out there. Everything from disappointment to anger, typically, at the lack of progress that people foresee at the state level. They were looking for a problem solver, a consensus builder. They want the next governor to be someone who can get things done. And when I take a step back and I try to ask myself, what is it about Oklahoma's history? Why haven't we had the economy year after year after year that we think we deserve? Why is it that sometimes it doesn't seem like we can keep up with neighboring states? To me, the answer is health and education. We have allowed our standards to slip. We have allowed our priorities to be replaced. And year after year after year, we have not had the high level of standards for health and education that we need. I intend to be the governor that 12 months a year discusses, sets the narrative, controls the tone, and talks to Oklahomans about what's truly important about being an Oklahoman. As long as we have so many people that are unhealthy, as long as we have so many people that are undereducated, we're never going to be the state that we should be. We've also got to work on our infrastructure. We've got to work on criminal justice reform. And most of all, we've got to look for leadership to move the state into the 21st century.
Thank you. Mr. Fisher?
Well, I believe that it's time for proper government in this state. It's time for a government that actually does what it's supposed to do, protects life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. And I don't think that our government is actually doing that. For example, abortion is murder and should be abolished immediately. Yet for 45 years, we have allowed over 60 million babies to be murdered. Over 200,000 here in Oklahoma. I'm the only candidate running in this race who is saying I want to abolish abortion. The only one who is willing to challenge the federal government and the U.S. Supreme Court to do it. Just remember that a government that will allow these babies to be murdered will also steal from you and lie to you. I want to protect every human life from conception to natural death. I also believe that we must reassert state sovereignty. I believe the power flows from God to the people, then to the government. It's the consent of the governed that we need to recognize here. Now, either states matter or they don't. I believe they do. I also am a Republican who believes in small government. Since 2006, Republicans have grown the state government spending by almost $4 billion. While I was in the legislature, I watched as we blew millions of dollars on non-core functions. And so if I'm governor, I will stop that. Government by its nature is inefficient. There's an old adage that says, if it ain't broke, government will fix it till it is. Well, if I'm governor, I can promise you I will fix the government and restore proper government to this state.
Thank you.
Yes, I'm Gary Jones. I'm currently state auditor, but I'm Mary Jane's husband of almost 41 years. I'm Chris and Kelly's dad, and I am Blake, Lauren, and Olivia's Papa Gary. And with that, I will tell you that what we're facing in the state of Oklahoma right now is poor management. You know, I went to work for Bell Telephone at 18. At age 20, I was in management. At age 21, I was on state staff doing independent cost studies. At 28, I started my own company, became a county commissioner, identified problems that need to be solved, like our county jail, helped to bring in new jobs. And when I became state auditor, we had a huge backlog. And we came in and we've cleaned up that office, we've cleaned up the backlog, and we've hired a professional staff. I've never had a political hire since I've been in office. Every person we hire is a capable, competent person. And I would tell you, if people ask the question, how do we get in this situation? How we got into it is when we start hiring people because they're our campaign manager or because they're our campaign consultant, we start filling boards and commissions with people that aren't qualified, you set yourself up for failure. I've been in management virtually all my life. And every single position I've had, I've left it better than I found it. So the question should be not only what our qualifications are. I'm a CPA, I'm a certified fraud examiner, I have a degree in business administration and accounting. And we've got to look to see who has the ability and the skills to go and identify the problems and really make changes. I've done that. I'm running on my track record, I'm running on my accomplishments, and I'm running on what I can do to make it a better Oklahoma. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Todd Lamb. I'm running for governor. Before I get into my introductory statement, I want to introduce two very important people. Been married 22 years, almost 23 years. I'm married way above myself. My wife, Monica's here. I think she's the best public school teacher in the state of Oklahoma. Would you please stand, babe? My wife, Monica. Next to her, yeah, no clapping. Hey, don't violate the rules. Don't want to get in trouble. Next to her is her mom, my mother-in-law, Laura Brown. Ladies and gentlemen, if you have your mother-in-law support doing anything, you're doing something right. Mom, thanks for being here. Many of you know my background in public policy. Some I've seen the crowd I've worked with in the private sector when I was a petroleum landman or in the telecom industry. Not everybody knows my background in law enforcement. I'm a former special agent with the United States Secret Service. When I was in the Secret Service, I went through a 5.5-month academy of rigorous training. Rigorous. Every assignment I had with the president required detailed planning. I'm running for governor because Oklahoma's in the mire we're in because we have no plan. My vision is to renew Oklahoma, RENEW. That's an acronym for Reform and Restructure the State Budget, Education Funding, but with reform, neighborhood focus of 77 counties, economic diversification once and for all, and working opportunities for the next generation. I ask you to join our efforts to renew Oklahoma. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Gary Richardson, and thank you for coming, and thanks to the Daily Oklahoman for giving us this opportunity to share our visions for our state. Last year there was an audit done, and 57% of the people said they were unhappy with our legislators. 58% said they were unhappy with our governor. 64% said we need an outsider to run our state, someone with a different vision, someone with different goals. I'm a former assistant insurance commissioner for the state of Oklahoma, former state prosecutor, and former United States federal prosecutor appointed by President Ronald Reagan to handle the county commissioner scandal back in the early 80s. And we did handle it, and we took care of it. I'm thankful he entrusted me with that job. I'm asking Oklahomans to entrust me with a job as governor of Oklahoma. I'm not looking for a career. I'm looking to do something to turn our state around. And some might say drain the swamp. I will tell you that I've said for 14 months now that I will audit every agency in the state of Oklahoma, and I mean some with forensic audits and some with performance audits. I will audit every agency, every authority, and every trust. We will get to the bottom of what's causing our problem. We'll quit putting gas in a tank that's got holes in the bottom of it. Like going to a doctor, if our body isn't working well, he researches our body. I will review Oklahoma. Thank you very much.
Hi, thank you so much for having us here tonight. My name's Kevin Stitt. I want to talk to the one person here that doesn't have a cap on or a t-shirt for whoever for my opponent. So I want to find that person, so I want to talk to them tonight. Anyway, so a little bit about myself. I'm not a politician. I grew up in Norman, went to school in Stillwater, always been an entrepreneur, always wanted to have my own business. So moved to Tulsa after college, started my company with $1,000 in a computer. Today, we employ more than 1,200 people. We have offices in 41 states. That's what I've been doing for my whole career for the last 18 years. It's all been about setting strategy, leading, setting the vision, hiring the right people, putting the plan together. So why am I running for governor? You know, as I travel and visit our offices all over the country, I go to Texas all the time, and I get so frustrated. You can see 15 cranes going up in any direction, and I go visit our offices in other states, and the tremendous momentum that's happening all around us, that's why I'm running for governor, because I come back to my state that I love. I know we can do so much better. I've got a vision for us to be a top 10 state, top 10 in growth, top 10 in education, and top 10 in infrastructure. We have the greatest state in the union, and it's time that we start doing it.
Thank you, gentlemen. We're going to dive into the questions now, and the order will be, we'll move down one to the right, or to the right here. Mr. Fisher, we'll start with you on this first one, and then circle back around. Oklahoma just witnessed a 2-week teacher walkout, the threat of which spurred the legislature to approve more than $400 million in new taxes on oil and gas production, cigarettes, and motor fuel to fund a teacher pay raise and some additional school funding. I'm asking for your thoughts about the tax package. Specifically, would you have signed it as governor and why?
Well, I have a unique perspective on this because my wife and I were both school teachers. Every year we would sign a contract and we would agree for a certain amount of pay for the next 180 school days. It would have been unthinkable to us in that time to break that contract and break our word and go on strike during the school year. So first of all, I did not support that. Now, would I support a teacher raise? If they deserve a teacher raise, they've earned one, they need to have one. I do not believe that the proper way to deal with that, though, is by raising taxes. I believe that education, like all of the other branches of our government, is overbloated with administrative costs. We have tremendous areas in which we could reduce the cost of education and put that money directly into the classroom. We must learn that the answer is not always throwing more money at a government program. I have often said giving more money to a government like this is like throwing more drugs at an addict. It will not solve a thing. So had I been the governor, no, I would have not have signed that. Not out of lack of support for the teachers and education, but out of the fact that I believe there is a better way. I believe there is a better way to fund education than crisis government. So that would be my position. I appreciate what the teachers do. Education is critical, but guys, we need a complete system overhaul. So that's my position. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, if you look back in the last 20 years, we've lowered the income tax from 7% to 5%. Every quarter-cent reduction is $160 million. 8 quarters is 1.28 billion. We lowered the gross production tax for the first 3 years from 7 to 2 because politicians got behind closed doors with their major donors and gave them a sweetheart deal. Raising that back up to 5% is not raising taxes. It's putting it at a reasonable level. If we pay 5% income tax, 5% is a reasonable level. When I've signed that bill, it was my plan. I sat down, when I sit there and watch the A-plus plan fail, when I watched Step Up fail, and I watched where the legislators were passing raises for teachers and not funding it, and watching the crisis that we were facing, it was like seeing the train coming and not reacting to it. So the day after Step Up failed, I'm walking down the hall and I mentioned my plan to a Democrat rep. I've mentioned this plan to Republicans for over a year. The Democrat rep, they called me the next day and said, "We love your plan." They asked me if I would come and stand up with them to explain it. Now, Republicans stand up with 28 Democrats. What does that look like? It looks like leadership. What we did is we got the plan passed. We got the teachers a pay raise. If they had done it a month before, we could have averted the walkout, and that's what we should have done, because if we lose more teachers, we're not going to be attractive to businesses, and we're not going to be able to grow. So yes, not only would I have signed it, it was my plan.
About 3 weeks ago, 1 week after the package was signed, Fox News asked me to appear on the Shannon Bream Show. And I stated then, and I'll state again this evening, the tax increase package that supported the teacher pay raise gets an F in reform. We have done this historically in Oklahoma. Liquor by the drink, paramilitary gaming, House Bill 1017, the education lottery. We've kicked the reform can down the road. In a Governor Lamb administration, here's the reform you will see: fiscal reform and rigor reform. It's time we require a minimum of 65% of every education dollar to go directly in the classroom for teacher pay, new textbooks, and new smartboard technology. The statewide average right now, based on one report I've seen, less than 46% on a statewide average is going in the classroom. I talked to countless teachers at the state capitol the last couple of weeks. Every teacher I spoke with all across Oklahoma loves 65% requirement, minimum 65% in the classroom. Rigor. Last year, Oklahoma, of all the high school graduates, 40% had to be remediated when they went to college. 40%. It's time we require third graders to read at the third grade level before they exit third grade. And in a STEM environment, it is time, and you'll see this in the Governor Lamb administration, before children get out of the third grade, they must be able to do third grade math. Reform in fiscal and rigor reform in education.
Thank you.
I say that the sad part about it happening, the walkout, is the fact that it didn't have to happen. I have on my website, GaryRichardson.org, a kitchen table plan that shows how we could save our state just by making some changes, saving money, $450 million a year. And in that plan, it shows how we could have given the teachers the $5,000 they were asking for months ago. I understand their anger. I understand their frustration. But I do not believe raising taxes is the answer to the problem we're facing today. Representative Calvi said recently, when we saw the results of the audit of the State Health Department, $30 million plus misappropriated, Tourism Department, Agriculture Department, he said, and this is a quote, paraphrasing a quote, he said, "I doubt that we've seen the tip of the iceberg yet. Raising taxes, in my opinion, simply helps cover up what's going on in the agencies." When our leaders were asked about the 3 agencies I just named, is this going on in all the agencies in Oklahoma? The answer that was given is, we don't know. On our kitchen table plan, it talks about doing audits. It talks about how to find money that could be found like the Medicaid, saving $86.5 million a year by doing an audit on the Medicaid, taking people off the road that doesn't belong on the road.
Thank you.
You know, this is the reason I'm running for governor, because if the career politicians could have fixed it, they would have. We wouldn't have been in this situation if I was here, if I was as governor. We've got to be top 10 in education. It starts with a vision. It starts with we've got to do better in education. The rhetoric is that Oklahomans don't value education right now. And as governor, we have got to get dollars into the classroom. We've got to look at the funding formula. When I look at how our education system's funded, I was in western Oklahoma and met with a school district over there that just spent $1.5 million on a new press box. And then they just rolled out new AstroTurf. And I love high school football. But then they told me they didn't have paper for the classroom and they just lost their English teacher. We've got to figure out where our dollars are going. And when I look at other states, how they fund that, the other states use the local dollars to actually fund not just buildings and construction, but also operations budget. So we've got to look at how other states are funding so we get dollars in the classroom instead of at kind of a bloated different level of administration. That's what business people do. We whiteboard it, we look at it, we actually make decisions so we can get dollars and focus on the outcome so we can be top 10. Our kids not only need to be top 10 in the U.S., but we're facing a global marketplace. We've got to look at what's happening overseas as well.
Thank you.
I'm glad the governor signed it. I think going forward, we've got to grow our economy and diversify our economy if we intend to be the state that we want to be. You know, 25 years ago, Oklahoma City was a place that a lot of people didn't pay a whole lot of attention to. We probably had the worst economy in the country. We invested in ourselves, and that's what Oklahoma has to do. We have to invest in education. We have to invest in our future. We have to invest in our infrastructure. But we're going to have to invest. We can't wait for someone from the outside to come save us, because they're not going to come. If the state of Oklahoma is going to succeed, it's going to have to invest in itself, and that includes fundamental reform and education and health and wellness and a lot of the other attributes that the state of Oklahoma deserves and has deserved for a long, long time.
Thank you. Oklahoma currently has the second highest incarceration rate in the nation and is on pace to have the highest. The state prison system is operating at 115% of capacity, and the Department of Corrections director wants 2 new prisons and 1,000 more prison guards. What steps would you take to reduce the number of incarcerated Oklahomans during a possible 4-year term? Mr. Auditor, we'll start with you.
About 13 years ago, there was an audit done by a company called MTG that came in and recommended that the state spend about $10 million. They spent almost $1 million on that audit. And the legislature said that we don't have $10 million, so they ignored it. About 5 years ago, we did an audit on corrections. We said that your guards are underpaid, you don't have enough, your facilities are crumbling. You're going to have to make an investment in the programs and find ways to quit trying to be tough on crime and be smart on crime. And basically, the legislature's pretty well ignored that. So what we have to do is we have to do the things, first of all, to get treatment for people with drug and alcohol, and find ways to keep them out of prison, to keep them as productive citizens, but still punish them, get them the treatment they deserve. But also, we got to quit warehousing people and start giving them training programs so they can come out with a profession that's different than the one that got them in there. But what you'll do is every time you look at this and you see what other states have done, you've got to start making those investments to turn it around. And the legislature in Oklahoma right now has not been willing to make those investments that in turn will start turning things around. That's one thing we're doing throughout state government. We think we can cut and cut our ways and solve the problems by doing that, but there's some things that we have to invest in, and this is one. If we're going to get a positive return back on that, where we can treat people, make them productive citizens, and make them productive citizens when they come out, we're going to have to invest in that, and that's what I would do.
The question is, what will you do? As a governor, I'll do what I've done already. I'm a proven conservative in criminal justice reform. And by the way, unless somebody corrects me at some point tonight, I think I'm the only candidate up here that's ever chased, tackled, wrestled, and handcuffed a bad guy. There's this image of the Secret Service with sunglasses and an earpiece and Air Force One, but there's also a lot of white-collar crime investigation. And I learned early on white-collar crime is a misnomer. I've been engaged as a law enforcement official in my previous career. As a state senator, I authored a pilot program focusing on a non-violent female offender to improve them while they were incarcerated, so once they were released, possibly early release, they were prepared to enter the workforce. It was modeled after a program in Tulsa called Women in Recovery. I did that as a legislator. I think the recent package that was passed by the legislature should reduce the future bed requirement by 4,000, just under 5,000 beds in Oklahoma. We have roughly 27,000 inmates in DOC. That doesn't include counties and halfway houses and early release homes. 27,000 that we're housing on an average at $47 a day. It's cost prohibitive to continue the rate we are. We expect to be national champions in athletics. We do not need or want to be national champions in the incarceration of the non-violent offender.
No question, we badly need criminal justice reform in our state. Texas last year had criminal justice reform, and they're closing down 9 prisons. In Oklahoma, we're looking at building 2 new prisons at the cost of $800 million. We're number 1 in the nation in incarceration of females. The country of Thailand is the largest per capita in the country, in the world. We do twice as many incarcerations of females in Oklahoma as the country of Thailand does. Twice as many. There's some bills going through the House and Senate right now that are looking at addressing the issue of sentencing. We do have to have sentencing reform. But we also have to have criminal justice reform. 55% of the people we put in prison today have mental health problems or some kind of addictions. It costs $23,000 a year to put them in the penitentiary. An alternative for them would be $5,000 a year. We've got to get smart at how we deal with these problems.
Thank you.
So this is something that I had no idea I was going to be so passionate about, but as I've researched it, you're right. We're number 1 in female incarceration, number 2 overall, fixing to be number 1 overall because Louisiana just passed criminal justice reform. So I've met ladies all over our state that some of them sentenced 45 years in prison for $200 worth of drugs. The amount of drugs can fit in the palm of your hand. Where another state might have given them drug court. We have got to change this. We are sticking out like a sore thumb. We're number 1 in something that we should be number 50 in. So that's why I'm running for governor. So you look at we have the nonviolent drug offenders, we are incarcerating them 80 to 100% more than the states around us. We need to open up our minds and look at what market is. Market to me are what the states around us are doing, and come up with those type of fair sentencing across all the counties and looking at other states, only 30% of our prison population are the violent drug offenders. We've got to give our prosecutors the sticks they need to keep those guys in jail, but there's certainly better outcomes from the private sector and drug rehabs that we can institute that are going to be much, much better off for the people. Then plus, the unintended consequences, all the drag on society with with foster care and all the stuff that comes with incarceration, it's got to be fixed. That's one of my main pillars that I'll do in office.
I think that nothing is as powerful as an idea whose time has come. And when I look at criminal justice reform, I think now is the time we can start to make some serious headway, because I see support on the left side of the aisle and the right side of the aisle. And that's an opportunity for leadership to move forward and start to gain momentum. Our recidivism rate is embarrassing. You've heard the other candidates mention we're number 1 in women incarceration. I believe we're number 3 in men and number 2 overall. But if you look down the line, if we could just take care of the recidivism rate, our numbers would improve dramatically. It hurts me to admit that if a person drops out of an Oklahoma high school, chances are they won't be going back. But if a person gets out of an Oklahoma prison, chances are they will be going back. That's how poor our recidivism rate is. We do a very poor job of offering a person a better chance and a better path coming out. I'm not suggesting there aren't success stories out there, because they are. We need to champion those stories. We need to make them examples and show how people can turn their lives around. But we got to get people back reunited with their families, get them back in their support group, and figure out a way for them to have a productive life going forward.
I'm always amazed when we talk about this subject that social issues and morality never comes up. Because if this is the one subject where morality has a direct bearing, this is it. It's amazing to me that we've removed any kind of moral instruction from our schools or any other government institutions, and then we're surprised that we have a lot of crime. It is time that we walk a balance between fiscal issues and social issues. I'm one of the candidates up here that's actually talking a lot about social issues. Now, as far as crime reform is concerned, I am convinced that we cannot continue to lock up nonviolent criminals with violent criminals. All we do is make more violent criminals. Locking someone up is not the answer. I believe what we must do is for those nonviolent criminals, work on some kind of restoration program where they pay back their debt to society, literally, but they still can lead a life where we can help to do exactly what you're talking about, Mr. Mayor, is help them find a life so they're not going to fall right back into the same rut again. But if we ignore moral instruction, we're doing it at our own peril. And so I believe that's the greatest answer. We do that, and I believe Oklahoma's conservative colors will shine through, and we will fix this problem.
In recent years, the Oklahoma legislature has tried to put more restrictions on abortion, with state and federal courts standing in the way. As governor, would you pursue additional abortion restrictions that have already been deemed unconstitutional?
Carla, thank you very much. I thought you might get the pro-life question, the defense of life tonight. Again, this goes back to being a proven conservative. I'm not offering you rhetoric. I've got a biblical worldview. I gave my life to Christ July 3rd, 1983, at a Starlight Crusade. I bet some of you might have been there in Del City, Oklahoma. I believe that God has every hair on my head numbered. I believe God knew me before I was formed in my mother's womb. As a state senator, I led the first override of a governor's veto in more than 14 years. I did that as the principal author in a bill that defended life. As a legislator, as a husband, as a dad, as a believer, I've always defended the unborn. As governor, I always will.
I would say that growing up in a very conservative family on a cotton farm in deep South Texas, moving there at the age of 9 from Caddo, that I've always been very involved in the church. My dad was also a minister. And I believe as much as anyone that we must do something about abortion. No question about it. I know that some disagree with my thoughts on it, but I also believe that we do it the legal way. I believe very much that Romans 13:1 tells us to follow the law of the land. And verse 2, I don't like what it says. If you don't, go read it. I'm sure you have. It's not good as to what will happen if you don't follow the law of the land. I believe as long as there is a legal mechanism whereby we can work at changing Roe versus Wade, that we do it. Then if it comes to a place there is no legal way, then we take up arms and do what we have to do. But as long as there's a legal way, I do believe that we are to follow the Scriptures, Romans 13:1 and 2. I respect anyone that disagrees with me, and I would ask the same of them, because that's just where I come from and what I believe.
First off, I'm the most pro-life person in this race. I've got 6 children. Secondly, as governor, I'm going to do whatever I can to protect life. I believe life begins at conception, and I'll do whatever I can as governor to protect that. I've been meeting with Tony, I always can't pronounce his last name. You guys know who I'm talking about, who's been focused on this issue since 1973, fighting Roe v. Wade. We have got to change the Supreme Court. We've got to restrict it. We're the 3rd most restrictive state. I'd like to see us move to number 1, and as governor, I'll do whatever I can to protect life.
I think all of us realize our lives are shaped by emotional experiences that we go through. And I can remember I had a son born in 1983, Casey, who's somewhere back in the audience today. And when Casey was born, we almost lost him. Casey was in an incubator for the first few days of his life. And I remember, after a few days, and he was still in there and still not being able to breathe on his own. And I would leave the TV station after work and be about midnight, and I'd get over there. And I remember, just thinking about all the things that I didn't know he and I would share together or not. And I remember sticking my finger under the plastic tent, and this little baby grabbed my finger with his full fist, as if he was sending a signal that he was going to be okay and that we were going to get through this together. But whenever I think of the pro-life movement and why I so strongly support it, I think back to that moment. If you've almost lost a child, you may have had a similar experience as well. I know there's a lot of people in Oklahoma that feel just as strongly about the pro-life movement. And I want them to know that I will not disappoint them as governor. But we also have other issues that we've got to concentrate on as well. We've got to have a strong economy. I want to grow the economy. I want to diversify the economy. I want to invest in education. I want to invest in health and infrastructure and do a lot of the things that we need to do as Oklahomans to create the type of state that we all want.
I think the fundamental question we have to answer is, what is abortion? If it's murder, we treat it like murder. Now, we've been trying for 45 years to incrementally stop murder. Isn't it interesting that we don't try to incrementally stop bank robbery? We don't try to incrementally stop any other kind of homicide. It's just abortion. Now, I agree that the Scriptures teach that we're submit to government, proper government. But when the laws of man come into conflict with the laws of God, we have a higher law that we must respond to. The Supreme Court is not infallible. It's not God. Remember in 1857 in the Dred Scott decision, they said black people weren't people at all. They were property. Were they right or wrong? Should we have complied with that? What about the Hebrew midwives that defied Pharaoh? What about the apostles refusing to obey the law and preach the gospel? What about Daniel praying anyway? Friends, we find multiple examples in Scripture where people of faith must stand up. Now, we've had a Republican majority appointed Supreme Court 3 years before Roe v. Wade, since 1970. We keep waiting on the Supreme Court to fix this, and it will never be fixed. It is time for some states to stand up and say, no, this is murder. We're going to treat it as murder, and we're going to minister to those who've had an abortion. They're carrying a load of guilt. We need to minister to them. We need to help mothers who have unplanned pregnancies. But friends, we cannot treat this as any other way but murder, and any other way is a sin, I believe, to God above.
Yeah, I think all of us here would admit that we're pro-life, and you know, my brother-in-law and I furnished free rent to the Pregnancy Crisis Center in Lawton for 6 years until they outgrew our building. We've got to be able to provide alternatives, and for instance, we've got to get more money into the foster care system. So when these kids are born, they have a place to go. And so when girls start facing that decision, that they have an alternative, they know that those kids will be taken care of in Oklahoma. So we need to make sure that we don't just take care of the kids that are unborn, but we take care of the kids once they're born, so people will see that they will have a life and have a good life. And that's what we need to focus on, is making sure that we take care of both the unborn and once they're born as well.
The oil and gas industry is Oklahoma's largest economic sector, but it's also cyclical and heavily dependent on geopolitical factors. So at what rate should the oil and natural gas gross production be taxed? And what should be done to ensure that the industry appropriately contributes to the state economy?
Well, as I've already said, I do not believe raising taxes is the answer to our problem. When I started the race for governor, I had a fellow come to see me, and he wanted me to support the GPT, gross production tax. I said, I can't do it. He said, why not? I said, I don't believe that that's the answer to our problem. He left. He came back 3 or 4 months later. He said, Gary, I'm back to tell you that if you will support the GPT, I will max out to you, I will raise you money, and I will help you get support for your campaign. I said, I can't do it. I said, if I was going to take that route, there's no reason for me to run. I'd be just like the others, raising taxes to try to answer the problems. When I believe that raising taxes is simply to help cover up what's going on in our state today. So I would not be for raising taxes. I do believe we have to look for alternative ways of having business in Oklahoma. And one of the best ways is when we take the toll gates down. You go to Miami, you don't see any industry. You go 30 miles further to Joplin, what do you see? Restaurants, truck stops, industry. We've got to do those things to bring industry to Oklahoma. That, I promise, I will do.
You know, as I've started running for governor here and went and talked to all these different industries, you know, in industry, I don't think we should be picking winners and losers in state and government. I look at market. What I call market is what other states charge. And so in the mortgage business, if I don't set the interest rates based on what I want, I set it on market. So if the interest rates today are 4.5%, I've got to be at 4.5% to get your business. If I had a 5.5% rate, I couldn't get your business. But I certainly don't need to give you a 3.5% rate either. I need to be market. That's the way I look at everything. So when you look at the GPT tax, or you look at an incentive to this industry or this industry or this industry, you need to look at what other states around are charging. And that's what a business person wants. We want a level playing field. We don't want an advantage or a disadvantage. We don't want anybody to have an advantage over us. So as long as we have a level playing field, then that is being honest with all 4 million Oklahomans. So I tell every industry I talk to, I'm not going to be the governor just for your industry. I'm going to be the governor for all 4 million Oklahomans, and we won't have any kind of different tax break for certain industries over another one, because that's disingenuous to Oklahomans. Thank you.
Every time we raise the gross production tax, we make ourselves more reliant on the oil and gas industry. We need to be less reliant going forward on the oil and gas industry. We have to diversify. About 25 years ago, when Oklahoma City and the state of Oklahoma emerged from that economic collapse of the 1980s, Oklahoma City made specific decisions about diversifying the economy. We invested in aviation. We invested in biomedical. We invested in tourism. And lately we've been investing in digital technology. And recently, it was named we were the 7th most diversified city in the United States. Now, the reason that's important is that going forward, the demand for oil and gas is probably only increased slightly, maybe a 1% demand increase for the rest of our lives. We're still going to need it. But peak employment in the oil and gas industry has probably already occurred. The oil and gas industry is now more efficient. They need fewer people to produce the same amount of excavation and product. And going forward, if we think we're going to grow our economy by growing the oil and gas industry, we're fooling ourselves. There are other sectors of the economy we've got to invest in. So let's be thankful for the oil and gas industry and everything it's brought us, but going forward, we have to diversify and have an economy that's more stable.
Well, I would echo that. I think that we ought to celebrate the fact that we have all of these natural resources. There are many states that would give anything if they had the kind of natural gas and oil reserves that we have. That's the first thing. The second thing that I think we have to remember is that businesses and corporations don't pay those taxes. We do. So whenever we raise taxes on corporations or businesses, you know what they're going to do? Their cost of doing business just went up. So they're going to have to pass that cost along to us. So every time we make it harder for businesses to do business in Oklahoma, we're making it harder for taxpayers to make a living and use the limited income that they do have. And some of the other states that are doing so well, they don't have corporate taxes. So one of the things I'd like to see us do, rather than raising the gross revenue tax, is reduce it. And you see business coming in because their cost of doing business is lower. But they don't pay the taxes. We do. So it just kind of amazes me that we want to raise taxes and think that we're going to attract businesses. We need to lower the tax burden and the regulatory burden, and businesses will want to come to Oklahoma. We have a great culture here. We have a lot of people of faith. It's a great place to be. We just have to make it feasible for them to do business. So that's what I believe we should do with the gross production tax.
The two main reasons they drill for oil and gas is because it's here and because of the price. Taking the gross production tax up to 5% is a minor factor, and yes, it is a factor. But you know, when you listen to some of these people up here, then we ought to just do away with all taxes. Let's just do away with taxes completely. But we do have certain services that we are required to deliver. And so we need to be reasonable with that. And I said a year ago that we ought to, what I call the 5-5-5 plan. If income tax is 5%, let's make gross production tax 5%. Put a 5% tax on wind energy. Let's be fair. You know, it's not fair for us to say that a certain business gets a reduction in their taxes when other people have to pay more. Let's be fair about it, because we have to have a certain amount of revenue. And I will tell you, when you cut $2 billion worth of revenue stream and you don't have a plan to cut expenses, that's irresponsible. And yeah, you're right. We are more dependent when it's at 5%. Guess what? If we got down to 1%, we'd be less dependent because we'd have less money to spend. But we do have problems, and we do have things that we need to solve. We have to be reasonable with that. And just because somebody has the political power and has the ability to hand out campaign contributions and they get a special rate, doesn't mean that when we raise that back to a reasonable rate that we're not doing the right thing, because what we did was the right thing, and it was for Oklahoma.
I've been on the record many times on the gross production tax. I was opposed, still am opposed, to raising the gross production tax. And I come at that not just as a public official, but I mentioned earlier I'm a former petroleum landman. I've seen what the oil and gas industry has done for farmers and ranchers all across Oklahoma with additional supplemental help and what they call mailbox money. When the farms dried up, ranch is hurting, oil and gas is helping with what's going on in the minerals under that farm or ranch. Roughly 20% of the revenue in the state of Oklahoma comes from the oil and gas industry, the hydrocarbon industry. Roughly 1 out of 5 jobs in Oklahoma directly or indirectly related to the hydrocarbon industry. That's the backbone of our economy. We must continue to diversify, but we must never divorce ourselves from the hydrocarbon industry in Oklahoma. If you want more of something, you subsidize it. If you want less of something, you tax it. And the recent tax increase on gross production was a very ill-advised move on behalf of the state of Oklahoma. When the tax rate was at 2%, here's what happened. It was a record. The consecutive months in a row, rig count was up. Record investment from the School Land Commission, which is the largest mineral owner in the state of Oklahoma. Record amounts contributed to common education because of a low tax rate. We must support the oil and gas industry. It's the backbone of our economy as we look forward to continue to diversify Oklahoma's economy.
Thank you. We're going to check in here with Justin, who's been on social media, and see if he's got a reader question for us now.
Oklahoma's health department is under federal investigation after overspending $30 million. What, if anything, should be done to ensure this does not happen again?
So you're talking about the Department of Health? I had a hard time understanding.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. So this is exactly why we need a business person and outsider running state government. Well, the question was, $30 million was just lost from the Department of Health. Nobody's held accountable. Everybody points their fingers at somebody else. Running state government is more like running a business than anything. We spend $22 billion in our state. We only appropriate $6.5 billion. That's like your checkbook being on auto draft for 50 years and you never go and checking on it. All right? We have to get more control over the whole $22 billion. We have to hire the right people, put them in positions in those different state agencies so we can run them effectively and efficiently. Then you put performance metrics in place to make sure they're delivering the services they need. I have 25 different cost centers. It takes a while to learn how to hire the right people because whether you're the CEO or the governor, you cannot dig into all the details. You cannot get into the weeds on every single different issue. That's why you have to be a manager. That's why you have to learn how to hire the right people, put those performance metrics in place. Some agencies have 500 employees, some of them have 1,000, some of them have 2,500 employees. And I ask myself, how many they have last year? How many they have the year before? How does the states around us organize their Department of Transportation and their different agencies? Because with technology, there's always more efficient ways to do it. Bigger budgets aren't always necessarily the better outcomes. You have to bring fresh ideas to fix this long term.
Well, we have to have more accountability in all of our agencies. Over the last 14 years that I've been mayor, I've also served as the chairman of the audit committee for Oklahoma City. I've overseen over 140 performance audits. We audit every department every year at the city of Oklahoma City. That's the culture I'm accustomed to. Now, during that time, we have raised the standards that the rating agencies look when they judge municipalities and determine their bond rating, and we've earned the highest bond rating that the rating agencies will allow a municipality to have. That's the type of accountability that we need to start putting into state government. Now, some of these agencies are just incredibly large bureaucracies that have gotten worse and worse over the years. We may need to go back into the state constitution, hold some statewide votes to put some of the accountability back into some of these agencies where it belongs. I want to do hard things. Going to a statewide vote is a hard thing, but I always ask myself when we're looking at really big change and change leadership is required, one, would it make a big difference? And two, is it politically viable? I think we can go into some of these agencies, and I think the citizens of Oklahoma are ready for a higher level of accountability. And the problems he described at the health department is just the latest example. But if we don't do something, there'll be another example the year after that, and another example the year after that. We've got to get to it.
When I served in the House of Representatives, I served on the Administrative Rules and Government Oversight Committee. In fact, I was the co-chair of that committee. I was amazed at how much government we actually have. It is simply unbelievable. It is also proven to be unmanageable. And so I agree. We need way more accountability and far more transparency. This is where I agree with Mr. Richardson. I believe that audits are critical, and I mean the kind of hard audits where we're not just seeing if the books balance. You can move the money around and make the books look good. The problem is we have these massive bureaucracies, and until we begin to trim government. Now, when I talk about trimming government and trimming taxes, I don't want to be misunderstood. I'm not talking about core functions. I'm talking about all of the government that is the bloated side of government, the government that we really shouldn't have or shouldn't have at that size. And that's the way that these agencies get away with this. I'll never forget, we had one agency ask us for a very sizable increase in their budget in 1 year They needed to do some things, and we were working trying to find the money to give them that request until we discovered they had that same amount of money in what they call a revolving fund, which we'd call a slush fund or a checkbook account. And we said, well, no, use that money, and then you can come back next year and ask for more budget money. So we've got to force these agencies to work just like the individual citizens do. Spend what you have and don't overspend what you have.
For 7.5 years, we've asked for the authority and the resources to do performance audits. We've had 4 different bills that got killed by a particular senator. We had one bill that finally got through, and the governor vetoed it. That type of audit would have uncovered this. But let me tell you, I'm at an advantage and a disadvantage on this question. Because number one, I know what happened at the health department. But Mr. Richardson, I would tell you that I was surprised to hear that you heard about the audit because we haven't put it out yet. It's still being audited today. And that will be out as soon as we get all the facts out there. And I will tell you that it is a complicated issue, and that's why you need professionals. That's why you need people that understand what they do. We do 2 different audits of the health department every year. And I would tell you what our people did in that process was exactly right. But that being said, there are other type of audits that you go in, you look for efficiencies and things like that that you don't look in a financial statement audit, and that's what we've done on the other audits. But I will tell you that it is a very, very complicated issue, and once you hear the results of this issue, you'll realize that. That's why you need people that not only understand business, but they understand how government business works. Because people tend to jump to conclusions. I've heard people talk about there's $100 million, there's $300 million missing. And where they get that, I have no idea. But like I said, as soon as we can give you the results of that audit, we will. And we've got 3 CPAs, we've got the top people working on that. We've got a total of 6 people working this very complicated problem out. In about a month, I think we'll be able to tell you exactly what we found.
I have a detailed plan to address this issue. The first part of my platform in Renew is reform and restructure the state budget process. There are 149 legislators elected by the people of Oklahoma. 5 negotiate the budget every single year in a closed room. Pastor Fisher's nodding. He might amen any minute here. 5 negotiate the budget behind closed doors. Imagine it smoke-filled, if you will. With 2 weeks to go, they walk out and force the rest of the legislature to vote on that budget. My plan as governor is to restructure the legislative session. First month, policy only, no budget. Board of Equalization meets, Oklahoma knows how much money there is to appropriate, and the last 3 months, no policy whatsoever, only budget. Going from the dark smoke-filled room to an open committee process using the current structure of committees and subcommittees, and now we have 149 legislators holding unelected bureaucrats accountable, not just for last year's appropriation, but for their very existence. Zero-based budgeting. I have the plan to get there. That addresses the issue like the health department and any other issue that could arise in the future. It'll be circumvented before it even raises its nasty, ugly head. I'll do that as governor.
The guy that came to see me twice, I ran out of time last time, came back a third time. The third time he said, Gary, okay, I understand you won't support GPT, but we need you leading our state. I'm on board. He gave me a check, maxed out. He's been raising money and he's been supporting me. What happened at the health department, also similar thing happened at the tourism department, as well as the agriculture department. And the health department had not had a performance audit for 13 years. And remember this, when the leaders were asked, is this going on in all the other agencies in the state? The answer was, we don't know. Back before I ever announced for governor, I was just looking at it. I got a call one day from the chairman of the board, secretary of the Turnpike, wanting to come to see me. Ended up coming, bringing a director of the Turnpike with him, as well as the former governor. Came for one reason, try to convince me that I did not need to be talking about an independent audit of the Turnpike. It's never been audited by the state. The governor's the only one that can call for an audit of the Turnpike. We've never had a governor do it. Governor's the only one that can give them a rate increase. Every time they get a rate increase, be it a governor, a Democrat or Republican, they get it in the lame duck session, of the sitting governor. I looked at the chairman of the board. I said, Kel, if I become governor, I will promise you and make a commitment to the people of Oklahoma, we will do an independent audit, Kel, a forensic audit, and the cover comes all the way off.
Thank you, sir. We're out of time there. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
You each are running for the Republican nomination for governor, and I'm curious, looking back over the last 8 years under Republican leadership, what was the most significant accomplishment in your eyes, and what was maybe the biggest missed opportunity? I believe we're starting with Mr. Cornett.
Well, I want to praise Governor Fallin for her leadership in criminal justice reform. I think she has really gone out on a limb. I think she's recognized as a national leader in this area, and it's not an easy issue for Republicans to lead on. I think she played a significant role in 780 and 781 in getting those to the voters. I'm disappointed they haven't been implemented more thoroughly. I was enthused to see the results last week as the legislature continued to make steps in that direction. But I think what she did in those areas should go acknowledged and appreciated. It's been a tough time to lead in this state, and I think her leadership on criminal justice reform should go unnoticed.
Did you mention maybe the biggest missed opportunity in your eyes?
Well, missed opportunities is just the inability of our state to diversify the economy. How many cyclical cycles do we have to go through in this state to realize that we can't be so heavily reliant on the oil and gas industry? I mean, it's been happening for over 100 years now. One issue after another as our economy just goes up and down. Diversifying our economy is a must for the state of Oklahoma going forward if we're going to be able to fund the services we need. And we haven't been making any significant changes in that area.
Thank you.
Well, I think one of the greatest accomplishments is we passed SB 1552, which would strip the license from physicians that perform abortions. Governor Fallin vetoed it. One of the greatest failures is the legislature refused to override her veto. Let me tell you another thing. We've had a Republican supermajority in the legislature when I was there. We have failed to do what we told the citizens we would do. We have not performed according to our Republican Party platform. We haven't done what we say we are. I spent 4 years there frustrated because the group of true conservatives were such a small minority that we could not do the very things that we said that we were going to do. We tried, but we're always outmaneuvered and outvoted. So one of the greatest disappointments for me is that I went into a legislature that literally would not fulfill its promise. So I was going to run unelected my third term. That's a race that even I can win, right? And I refused to do it because I believed that I could simply make a better difference in our state by serving my church and traveling, speaking as I do. But it's so disappointing that we have a supermajority in both houses, Republicans who say they're conservatives in all of the statewide offices, and we have not fulfilled the conservative promise to our citizens. And I think that is the greatest disappointment of all.
I think the biggest disappointment I have is the culture and the fact that we can't seem to get anything done. We're in constant crisis mode. We have no vision. There's no long-range plan. There's no 5-year plan, no 10-year plan, no 20-year plan. It's let's make it to the end of session. And what's wrong with the Capitol right now is that Democrats and Republicans don't trust each other. Republicans within their own caucus don't trust each other. The House and Senate doesn't trust each other, and nobody trusts the governor and her staff, so subsequently, nobody trusts government. What we have to do is come in and create a culture by which we can work together. I came in from I was chairman of the Republican Party for 6.5 years. They said, Gary, you'll be the most partisan person when you come to office. I've been the least partisan. I've never had a political hire. We do everything based on what should be done, and we call it the way it is. And so subsequently, I have respect by people on the Democrat side and Republican side. But we've got to come together and show respect for each other if we're going to be able to really address those problems and find solutions to those. And right now what you have is you people on the far right and far left. There's a song out there, I think, about Steelers Wheel. Clowns to the left of me, jokers to the right. Here I am stuck in the middle with you. I think about 80% of us are stuck in the middle. So what we have to do is come together and work together for the betterment of Oklahoma.
What was the question again? I got the disappointment part down. I can nail that.
Biggest accomplishment,
Okay, biggest
missed
accomplishment.
opportunity.
I think the biggest accomplishment and the greatest disappointment might intertwine in this issue. February 2017, I publicly resigned from the governor's cabinet. Now, let me just take a moment and pause and remind everybody that the governor and lieutenant governor are entirely autonomous. Don't you forget that. But I was in her cabinet as a small business advocate. She proposed in her State of the State address what would have been the largest tax increase in state history, almost $2 billion on services. As a small business advocate, I was in disagreement, and I publicly resigned. That package did not see the light of day after 25 legislators organically signed on and thanked me for my leadership in standing up to a tax increase. Now, there was a tax increase this session, but I think the greatest, what I was pleased that she did was pulling back on the service taxes that would have hurt small businesses all across Oklahoma. The greatest missed opportunity, lack of vision. Proverbs 29, verse 18 says, where there is no vision, the people will perish. Another translation says the people will be scattered. We are scattered and confused in Oklahoma because there has been no clear-cut vision. That's why I'm running for governor, to offer a plan for Oklahoma to renew our state. We have a supermajority, control the executive branch. We campaign hard to wrestle control away from the other party that had control for over a century. It's time with super ideas, with super majorities, to have super ideas.
Thank you.
I say just because you have an R behind your name doesn't mean that you're conservative or you follow Republican values. I became a Republican in Muskogee, Oklahoma, when it was 8-1 Democrat, because I read both platforms and realized that I was a Republican, and I believe in Republican values. We're like a ship going in a circle in our state without a captain, just going around in circles. And as my friend Gary Jones said, he has to get permission to do performance audits on agencies, and he didn't get that permission. But as governor, our auditor will get that permission to do the performance audits, the forensic audits that we need to do to get to the bottom of the problem. So I think she has failed our state. I truly do. I know Mary Fallon. I don't dislike her. But as a leader, I cannot support what she's done in her state. That's why I'm running for governor. We need to turn our state around, and I'm willing to do it. Thank you.
So the best thing that Governor Fallon did was remove the travel trailer off the governor's mansion. No, seriously. You know, I don't want to criticize, but I'll tell you what I will do. I will lead. And the legislature has a tough job. They only see what's right in front of their face. They can't see the forest for the trees. You have to set the plan from the governor's office, from the executive branch, and that takes leadership. I've got 5 pillars. We need a growth pillar, education, health, infrastructure, and efficiencies. Then you go off-site and you strategize. You always need a growth plan. Here's the 5 things we're going to do this year, next year, the year after. Legislators, every time I talk to them, I ask them, when I win this thing, how can I do a better job? They tell me this: have a plan, meet with us. Come hang out with us on the 4th floor. That's how I intend to lead. Can't really say about her, but that's how I'm going to do it.
There is a bill in the legislature that would exempt faith-based adoption and foster care agencies from participating in child placements that violate their religious beliefs, such as their stance against same-sex marriage. Critics of the legislation have said it discriminates against gay couples. Where do you stand on this legislation?
Mr. Fisher, I believe we're starting with you on this one.
Well, first of all, I think that a person's religious beliefs are theirs and they shouldn't be discriminated against, if I understand the question correctly. I do not believe that the basis upon adopting a child or being a foster parent should revolve around what those parents believe religiously or whether or not they possess firearms, which is a Second Amendment right, or any kind of persecution or discrimination in any way. So I would certainly stand against any kind of restrictions that would be based upon faith and personal belief and practice, as long as they prove to be sound individuals and could provide a good home and a good environment for that child. For Pete's sake, we need all of the foster parents and ultimately the adoptive parents that we could possibly have. And of course, I come from the community of faith, and I can tell you that in my experience, and I know that there are exceptions in any movement or group, but in my experience, some of the greatest parents I know are people of faith. And so I think anything that we do to restrict their ability to adopt or be foster parents would be ridiculous, and I would be completely against it.
Well, I just want to follow up real quick. The piece of legislation here is targeting parents who may be a same-sex couple. So allowing faith-based agency.
I'm so sorry, I just couldn't hear her.
No, that's fine. So
I apologize.
I just want to give you a chance because I thought maybe you didn't. So an agency, a faith-based agency, would be allowed to restrict an adoption to a same-sex couple.
Well, I would feel the same way about them. That's their faith, that's their religious belief, and they ought to be able to practice what they believe without being forced to compromise their beliefs, just like Christian bakers and florists who are being asked to violate their religious beliefs. We should not do that. I apologize that I did not hear and misunderstood. I apologize.
I believe people ought to be able to practice their faith, but I also believe that we need to make sure that we don't limit the good parents out there that might be willing to adopt a child, because a lot of children are not adopted. We've got to open it up to more people that are willing to do that, and I think that because of that, we need to be careful to start restricting those, because we're going to end up hurting the kids.
Again, as a proven conservative, I'm not trying to offer rhetoric tonight, but look at my record and what my plans are as governor, detailed plans. As lieutenant governor, I've stood firm in defense of religious liberties. We need to remove the Blaine Amendment from our state constitution. Got another amen from the pastor. Thank you, Pastor. So this is a simple answer. As it's been explained, it was explained twice, I would support the legislation and defend our faith communities.
I say that in order to respect someone, we don't have to agree with them. I also say that I was at a dinner at the country club in Tulsa last year, and a couple sat next to me that were of the same sex, and he said, "I hear you're running for governor," and I said, "Yes." He said, "Well, are you for same-sex marriage?" And I said, "I don't think there is such a thing." I said, "If a man wants to live with a man or a woman wants to live with a woman, that's their business. I don't have any problems with that. That's freedom of choice. I will support that. I will also support keeping abuse from happening to those that may live their lives differently than others think they should." I've written a book called Black Robe Fever. The theory of the book is all cowards seek positions of power because the more power they have, the more safe they feel. And when a coward gets power, they will become a bully. Typically people say, "I know someone like that." But I respect people whether I agree with them or not. And I think that's the thing we need in leadership in our state. You know, supporting people that we may not agree with as long as it's not against our principles. That's the type of leader I will be.
So I would definitely support legislation that protected freedoms of religion. So if a faith-based organization is getting into adoption, they have the right to exercise that. If you change that on them, then you're going to see those people leave that industry, or there won't be as many providers. I want to do one other thing though. Under my health pillar, we've got a foster care issue, and we've got teenage pregnancies, and we've got a lot of social issues. So as governor, I'm going to go to every single county and bring the community leaders and the pastors together. And as a pastor's son, I know the denominational differences that sometimes divide us, but we can come together as a county and in a community and say, "Hey, here's the teenage pregnancies, here's the high school dropouts, here's the foster care. Let's solve this in our county, because you can't always look to Oklahoma City, Washington, D.C., a new law to fix this. We need to fix it county by county. When you break your goals up, smaller goals, 77 times, it's so much easier to move the needle. And as governor, that's a leadership idea that I have.
I think we got to put the kids first, and I'm for policies, I'm for programs that increase the chances of a kid being adopted, either it's a foster parent or a legal adoption.
Oklahoma quickly has become the fourth largest wind energy producer in the country. The industry has benefited rural schools and communities and helped lower electric rates, but tax credits have ballooned beyond what state leaders expected. Two-part question. How should the industry be taxed and incentivized in Oklahoma? And should changes be made now to an industry that was attracted to the state with the promise of tax incentives?
Yeah, first of all, I think that we need to restructure the depreciation schedules on those. They depreciate out too fast. What we have done is we've given them 5 years worth of free or abated or done away with their taxes for 5 years, and the state's paid it for them. So if you understand the issue, and there's things that we can do. For instance, we can do an income approach, which means that as long as they produce energy, the schools will get it at a particular rate instead of depreciating it down to 20% of what they're getting, because it has a real impact. It's one of those accounting things I've probably got too much in the weeds on, but basically we need to restructure that so they have a steady stream within those schools. But I will tell you that if we have given a incentive that is too healthy, it's not fair, I think we need to correct it. If you make a mistake, you need to correct the mistake. And just because you've done something doesn't mean it was a proper thing to do, so we need to go back and address those issues, and if it needs to be corrected, let's do it and make it fair.
Much of the wind energy incentives have been curbed at the legislature the last 3 years, whether it's zero emissions, the ad valorem, deferment. Now there's a discussion about applying a tax rate on wind energy, legislation moving through the process as we speak. If the goal was to incentivize wind farms, mission accomplished. The challenge I have and the frustration I have with any incentive we have on the books, and that in part explains why I'm against tax increases. Last year, Oklahoma allowed $8.9 billion in special giveaways. If just 2.5% of that was misappropriated or mismanaged or fraud, that's $225+ million of taxpayer money that goes out the door every single year. But specific to wind energy, Adam, there are 3 problems with our incentives, and wind energy was one of them. When the incentive went on the books, there was no object stated in the statute, no sunset date in the provision, and no financial ceiling. This is the greatest challenge we've had with wind energy and other incentives. No financial ceiling. So once the incentive was placed in statute and on the books, it was Katie barred the door financially. And that goes back to my very detailed specific plan as governor to restructure the budget process. That will be curtailed and addressed in a Governor Lamb administration.
Former Governor Frank Keating, also my law partner when he became governor of Oklahoma, has been on TV in the past saying that it was a mistake what we did with the wind industry. You know, they didn't come here because of corporate welfare and the tax credits we gave them, because they didn't come until we built the infrastructure that they needed. So building infrastructure is a key element of getting businesses into Oklahoma. And I say that we need to back off on buying companies to come to Oklahoma. You know, we see them come and leave another state because we give them more money, and then they stay here for a while, and then go someone else that gives them more money than we gave them. We've got to develop our state in a way that they want to come here because of Oklahoma, who we are, what we're doing, and the visions we have for our state. I do believe giving the wind industry the corporate welfare we gave them was a mistake. I understand that the wind energy that they're producing goes out of state. Another mistake. That's my answer.
So it was a bad deal. The governor that negotiated that even said he thought it would cost our state $4 to $5 million. It's up to the $100 million range. I'm not for, your specific question was retro. We can't retro change something and move it back after investment's been done, after industries came in and invested in the state based on a promise. But we certainly can stop this going forward and negotiate better deals going forward. So when I've talked to that industry or whatever industry I go talk to, it comes back to market. We need to have every industry in our state creating jobs and growing, but we don't need to do it on the back of all 4 million Oklahomans. There's no need to give a special incentive over other states around us. So that's what I tell the industries is I'll make sure that you're competitive with other states around us, and you'll be able to do business here. But I don't think that we should do special giveaways to certain industries.
The wind industry got over-subsidized, and I think the oil and gas industry has a right to be upset about it. But I don't think we should demonize the wind industry going forward. There's a lot of investment coming in. It's helping our schools, it's helping our tax base, it's creating jobs. The problem with the original legislation was that they didn't ask themselves, if we put these tax incentives in place, what if they work? What if we actually do create a wind industry here? Because once they got it going, they didn't know how to get out. There was no exit strategy. There was no long-term plan on what they were going to do if the wind industry did accelerate its investment in Oklahoma. Long-term, we have to live up to what we promised. We have to become a state that does what it says it's going to do. But as others have said, we need to slow down on the wind tax credits going forward. Enough is enough. And it'd be nice if we taxed the oil and gas industry in a similar manner as the wind industry. The fact that they're taxed it differently always makes it hard to compare apples to apples going forward. And so you see a lot of misleading advice and misleading social media out there that implies one thing that's really not exactly true. And so there's a lack of quality information on the two energy sources. But going forward, we need both. It's just one more level of diversification for the state.
This is the kind of corporate welfare that I stand against. I mean, first of all, where were the wind energy people going to go? We're one of the states that has the wind, right? So here we are having all this wind, and now we're subsidizing them to come to Oklahoma. We're about to write a $70 million check to the wind energy this year, which is ridiculous. So this is what happens when government gets outside of its core functions. The job of government is not to meddle in the free market. If the wind energy is viable, it will make it. If it's not, it won't. Now, I'm not suggesting that government should be blind and not even try to help budding industries and do everything that we can to make it feasible for them to do business, but I don't want my tax dollars subsidizing businesses that are doing quite well. We are paying hundreds of millions of dollars to them. And here's the thing. If we don't put a sunset on this, did you know in the next 10 years, we're going to spend between $400 and another $600 million on wind energy? Now, this is just an example. I'm not down on wind energy. This is the example of what happens when the government gambles with our money. That's not the core function of government. What if instead of giving all those tax incentives and all of these ad valorem pass-bys by the wind energy, we'd taken that money and put it into education? Okay, so you get my point. This is what, as governor, I will stop, and we won't do this anymore.
Thank you. Well, before we do our closing remarks, we have time for one more question. I'm going to kick it over here to Justin to see if he's got a final question for us.
Yeah, I think I was too loud last time. Is that better? A little better? Politics is an ugly business, and politics in 2018 is especially so. So a reader asks that you say one nice thing about the person sitting to your right.
So, Lieutenant, and we'll make this a circle, but Lieutenant Governor, we are starting with you, and the question is a nice remark or a nice comment about the person sitting to your right. Lieutenant Governor, we'll start with you.
To your immediate right?
Yes.
Your immediate right.
Yes.
I've known Gary Jones for a long time. Gary Jones loves his family. There's no doubt about that. He does. Gary Jones loves his family. I've seen him with his kids and his grandkids. I've seen Gary all across the state of Oklahoma. And I know Gary cares a lot about Oklahoma. We all do, but I'm asked to talk about this guy right here. So we've traveled together. We've had lunch together over the years. We've had breakfast together. And I appreciate his friendship.
I've known Todd Lamb since he was about this tall. You're almost up here now. I knew his dad very well. Todd Lamb's been in my office a number of times, as well as his dad. As a matter of fact, when I was in Muskogee and in charge of the Christian Fellowship group, I had his father come down and speak to the guys. So he's a good friend with my son, Chuck. He just asked me about him a few minutes ago. So we're connected in that regards. I would say this also, he and I both outpunted our coverage when we married the wives we have. You have a very attractive wife. And he's a good family man, and I believe a good man. I do believe that. Todd, it's good to be your friend.
Thanks, Gary.
You know, I've been sitting next to Gary at most of our forums, and I've honestly, underneath my breath, I've been praying for Gary. And seriously, he is so passionate about the turnpikes, all right? So I've been thinking, day one in office, I'm going to appoint Gary to the Turnpike Authority. I don't know if he'll accept it from me, but we'll see when the day comes. Thank you.
You know, a lot gets made of Oklahoma City's incredible population growth over the last few years. I think nearly, 150,000 people since the 2000 census. But nobody is doing more to repopulate Oklahoma than Kevin and his wife. And their 6 children. No, seriously, Kevin is not only an admirable person, he's a role model for a lot of people. A self-made man, a person who puts Oklahomans to work, and a person who believes that Oklahoma ought to be a better place and is willing to get in the ring and fight for it. So I admire his ability to get in the ring and enter this race.
You know, in any kind of campaign, we all have different ideas and we're all pushing for the same office. But you know, I have to say that these guys have all been incredibly kind to me. And I've enjoyed getting to know all of them. Some of you I knew before, but it's been really great. Now, I've just met Mick Cornett just over the last few months. So I've watched him at a distance. But let me tell you what I told him the other night at a forum. I said, you're one of the most articulate guys I've ever been around. You are. You're an incredibly articulate person. Let me tell you another thing that strikes me about you. You are a person that you have a plan, and you go after that plan. And I admire that, and I mean that. I'm not just making up something because I have to answer this question. I'm telling you the truth. You're incredibly articulate, and you have obviously, as a mayor, had a plan for Oklahoma City, and you pursued it. And I admire that, and I want to thank you for the ability to sit right here beside you, be a part of these. Thank you.
One thing you say about Dan Fisher, he's passionate. And I will tell you that he truly, truly believes, and he believes that the unborn need to be protected. And I will tell you that he will go to any ends to do that. And I understand that, and I get that. And I admire him for that because, you know, every child has a right to life, and he will do everything he can to fight for that. So, Dan, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Well, we're going to make this our closing remarks time. Mr. Richardson, we'll start with you. Same amount of time, 90 seconds as we close out here. Your closing remarks tonight, and we'll start with you, Mr. Richardson.
Again, thank you for coming and allowing us the opportunity to share our visions with you tonight. Our state's in trouble. Yet at the same time, I say, and I've said for months, Oklahoma is not a poor state. Oklahoma is a state with poor leadership. As I said earlier, going like a ship in a circle without a captain. I've said for 14 months now that as governor of Oklahoma, I will review the state. I will audit every state agency, every authority, and every trust. We will find out where the holes are and quit pouring the gas into the tank and it keeps going somewhere besides where it's supposed to go. We will change that. We will turn things around. We are not a poor state. We just need leadership. I'm running for governor because I believe I have the background experience to take on the battles that we're looking at. As a former U.S. attorney, former state prosecutor, I believe I've been trained to take on battles. I'm very challenge-driven. The bigger the challenge, the more I'm driven. Someone said, well, Gary's angry. I think it's time we have a governor that's angry about what's going on in our state. I really do. I think anger's okay as long as you control it. My friends, I would appreciate your support. Thank you very much, and God bless you.
Thank you guys for being here tonight. Thanks for watching online. You know, as I've traveled, I've been to all 77 counties now, and I've met with people all over our state. And people are frustrated with coming in last place. They're frustrated to be at the bottom of these lists and being at the top of the list like female incarcerations. That's why I'm running for governor. I think it's going to take an outsider, a problem solver, somebody that's focused on the next generation, not the next election. That's why I'm running for governor. That's why I want to be your next governor. You know, I want to get there and end politics as usual. It's going to take a governor and a manager to come in and set up the 120 different agencies and put performance metrics in place so we can finally get control of this $22 billion budget that we spend. I think we need a new vision. I have a vision to be a top 10 state. I am so excited what's happening nationally with the Trump administration and what they've done with the corporate tax rate. We can bring that here. There is a move now to repatriate dollars to bring manufacturing back to the U.S. We have a great state. We have the best location of any state in the country. We've got the land, the natural resources to really be a thriving state. I want to lead us to that. So that's why I'm asking for your vote tonight and want to be your next governor and really focus on strengthening all 4 million families. We have a saying at my company. It's about strengthening families. And that's my focus. It's going to be strengthening all 4 million families as your next governor.
We've talked about a lot of really important issues tonight. I regret that we haven't had more time to talk about issues like mental health and opioid addiction, because I think both of those issues are two things that almost every city and state out there is going to have to deal with more and more going forward. We're not doing enough in those areas. I mentioned earlier the cultural shift that I believe is necessary in health and education. We as Oklahomans have to prioritize health and education in our lives, in our families, in our communities, and ultimately in our state. And there's one other cultural shift that may be the most important of all, and that's the culture at the state capitol. It has become all politics all the time. It has become rural versus urban, Oklahoma City versus Tulsa. It has become Republicans versus Democrats, Republicans versus Republicans. It has become House versus Senate. And it seems like by the time all that friction has been dealt with, it's about time for the session to end. And we as Oklahomans, I think, sit back and think, I don't think they really got around to addressing the issues that we have elected them to address. I want to go in as a problem solver, as a consensus builder, but most importantly, as a person who can help get things done. People are watching. People are expecting more outcome out of that legislative session. And I want to be the governor who can stand up and lead with authority and defend the state when necessary, but ultimately be the champion for health and education and a brighter future for Oklahoma. Thank you all for coming tonight.
I want to thank the Oklahoman for sponsoring this. I want to thank you for being here. You know, I believe that a structure is only as strong as its foundation. And I believe we have a foundational problem here in Oklahoma. I think many of the things that we've talked about tonight are symptoms. The foundation is broken. We have jettisoned and certainly departed from many of the founding principles that have made us a great state and have made this union a great union. So I believe it's time that we return to those founding principles. I'm the candidate here that's talking about all of the social issues because I believe they are part and parcel the cause for some of the other things that we're experiencing as a state. See, I want to lead Oklahoma to be the first abortion-free state. I want to lead Oklahoma to act like a sovereign state instead of a servant to the federal government. I want to lead Oklahoma to reduce the tax and regulatory burden on our citizens and cut them loose so that they can be the entrepreneurs that they dream to be. Now, if you want the same kind of a government that you've been getting over the last number of years, don't vote for me. But if what I've been saying resonates with you, then I want you to go to fisherforgovernor.com and look at what I'm talking about. Because if you like me, you're going to get some change. And if what I say resonates with you, I would appreciate your vote on June the 26th. Thank you so much.
Thank you for this opportunity to be here. And I would tell you right now, the biggest problem we're facing in the state of Oklahoma is a financial crisis. We have to have somebody that, number one, understands how we got here and what it's going to take to get out of it, and has the intestinal fortitude to do what's necessary. I would tell you, when Governor Fallon announced her tax plan, I disagreed with it. But I contacted the governor and said, Governor, I'm willing to work with you and give you alternative solutions. And I'm willing to work with anybody to find those solutions. You know, I've got a history of being a problem solver, whether it's being a county commissioner, building more bridges than anybody in the history of the state as a county commissioner. We solved our problem with our jail. When I became an auditor, we have a huge backlog. We cleared that backlog up, 5- and 6-year backlog, and we've done it with less money. We've reduced the amount of spending in my office by $2 million. We've showed what smaller government looks like. And folks, I'm running for governor because I've seen the inside of how this works, and not everybody in government caused this problem. There's those of us who have been speaking out saying we've got to do this better. In fact, I used to jokingly say, when I'm in charge, we'll do it different. Well, folks, I know what needs to be done, and I can start making those positive changes on day one. Because, folks, when I'm governor, we will do it different. The greatest compliment I ever got was someone who walked up to me and said, I want to shake your hand because you're the first politician I've ever met that did exactly what they said they're going to do. And, folks, that's what I'll do as your next governor. I'd love to have your support. Love to have your vote. Thank you very much.
Thank you again to the Oklahoman for sponsoring this forum tonight. Thank you all again for coming out and giving your evening to this process. What you've heard from me tonight were details, a specific detail plan. I was able to touch on my reform in education, funding reform in the classroom, rigor reform for our third graders to reduce that remediation rate. We touched a little bit on criminal justice this evening. I talked about restructuring the budget process and how to do that directly and specifically. We talked a little bit about economic diversification, but not a lot. I've got a detailed plan to expand our exports in Oklahoma. As governor, I'll appoint the first Secretary of International Trade Oklahoma's ever had to focus on diversifying our economy. I close tonight with a little bit of a confession. I introduced Monica earlier. We have 2 teenagers, a son and a daughter. Some of this is a selfish motive for me. I do not want our children to leave Oklahoma after they finish college because of a lack of opportunity. And good Lord willing, I'm a grandfather someday. I think I speak for everybody in this room. I don't want to visit my grandkids in another state because they were forced there because of a lack of opportunity in Oklahoma. I ask you to join us. Go to votetoddlamb.com, sign up tonight, talk to me after this is over, ask for a bumper sticker. Since you all came out tonight, I'll make you a deal. Bumper stickers for you are free. God bless you. Thank you. Let's renew Oklahoma.
Well, thank you, gentlemen. I'll ask the audience, thanking them one more time for their time at the forum tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm Kelly Fry, editor of the Oklahoman, and thank you all, gentlemen, for joining us tonight. These guys are out working really long days, and I really appreciate that you chose tonight to spend with us. Now, one of you will be coming back to join us for a governor's debate, gubernatorial debate on September 24th. So we welcome one of you back. Thank you very much. And I wanted you all to just stop and think about the coverage that all of these people are giving these 6 gentlemen right here and all of the gubernatorial candidates. So you can read about it in the Oklahoman. And gentlemen, I will say to you, we'll be watching. Thank you. Let's give them a round.